Hi, I'm the Multifarious Fisherman. This is Seven Fish. We're in the flood office today. Today kind of want to talk about the different styles of reel and what they can and can't do for you. People frequently ask, what is it that I should be running? Should I run a spinning? Should I run a bait cast? What's the best style of reel for what I'm doing? This video addresses that question. Hope you enjoy. You probably couldn't tell from the thumbnail or the title of the video, but I'm going to talk today about the three primary styles of reels. There is a fourth, that's this one here, but we'll leave that to Bugs. That's primarily his area. It's one I use a lot too, but I'm not going to deal with that in today's video. Today's video is about traditional fishing styles. The three primary types are, this is a Zebco 202, it could be a 33, it could be a Daiwa Silver Gold Cast, it could be any number of different reels. We would call this close face or spin cast. Another style of reel is open face spinning, and you do see me throw this quite a bit for specific applications, and I will get into that in a moment. But we would call this open face or spinning. And the third primary type, bait caster. This is a level wind style bait caster and happens to be a Shimano. But you'll notice that this reel sits on the top of the rod, and the rod for it has a trigger which assists me in holding that reel, and the first guide on the rod is quite short and small, so it's close to the rod and not very big around. The line comes out of this in a pretty organized fashion, goes right through that small guide and on down the rod. The spin cast style also mounts on top of the rod, has a trigger to help me hold that. Can also hold it up on like we do with the bait caster. It also utilizes the small first guide close to the rod, so when that line comes out of there, because it's coming out of this little tiny hole, it comes out in a fairly organized fashion, goes right down that rod. Open face spinning, on the other hand, hangs underneath the rod. Because of the way we hold that, which is in between two in front, two behind, that configuration has no trigger on the rod because it would be digging into my palm and pretty uncomfortable. I have this stem to help me hold the rod, so I don't need that trigger to assist me, and it would be frankly in the way. Now you'll notice that first guide on this rod, very big around and standing out away from the rod blank. And the reason for that is the line comes out of here, it flies off of this spool in a bigger loop, and if you had this first guide small and tight to the rod like it is on those other two, what you'd have is that line would slap that blank, slow the lure down, and you wouldn't be able to cast very far. So people frequently think of this as a beginner's method of fishing, and they're not too far from the mark with this. It is very simple, but I do want to get to it. So we will talk about this, but we will talk about it towards the end of the video. Let's start with this reel, because this reel, open face spinning reel, is a tool that does certain things really well and some things not so well. And what I mean by that is, I always use the analogy when I'm talking to people about this. A hammer is a fantastic tool, but if you're trying to drive a screw, it's not the right tool. This is a very efficient method of getting line out of the reel. In fact, if I hold it upside down, open the bail, that line will just fall out. There's no spool rotation on the cast. The spool's stationary, and it sits, you'll notice, counter to the direction that the line is coming out. It sits sideways. Because it sits sideways, to put it back on, we need this roller system. The line goes through this roller and onto the spool. This rotates around. So when I open that bail, the line is free to fly out off of that without having to turn anything, without any very, very little resistance. What this style of reel is good for is maximum casting distance and lighter lures. I can run lighter line weights and lighter lures with this reel, and the reason for that is because the line flows out of it so easily. It's a very, very efficient method of getting line out of the reel, like I said. Unfortunately, it's an inefficient system of putting line back in the reel. It's inefficient because when I turn the handle this way, it's turning a device this way to try to pull line this way. A lot of counter movement there. It's necessary because of the design. This, because it's an inefficient method of putting line back in the reel, is not a good tool for big lip crankbaits, spinnerbaits with giant blades, anything that pulls hard against it. It's going to be more wear and tear on that design. Bait cast reels are very efficient methods of putting line back in the reel. I turn the crank this way, it rotates the spool this way and pulls the line the direction of rotation. It is essentially a small version of a winch. Big lip crankbaits, big spinner baits, musky sized lures, anything that pulls hard that's going to work you out, this is the tool that you want to be running for that. Now, having said that, this is a very inefficient method of getting line out of a spool. So what happens with this reel is I depress a button, the spool rotates to let line out. So when I go to cast, that spool, which is sitting still, has to get up to speed and let that line out. When I put a heavier lure on here, something that has enough weight to get that spinning in a good way and to keep that line pulling out of the rod, even in wind or anything like that, it's a very good tool. In fact, it's the tool of choice for a lot of fishermen. Now, I'll tell you this, you'll see a lot of tournament fishermen, a lot of guys on TV and YouTube running bait cast reels, and everybody wants to run bait cast reels because everybody sees all the guys doing it. Understand what you're watching. If you're watching a guy who's in a boat throwing big lures for bass, and he's pitching docks and he's running around, he is moving his boat in the correct position to make those casts, and he makes the casts fairly short. If he was walking the bank, he probably wouldn't be running that bait caster because he would want to be able to get the lure out to the fish. So if you're a bank fisherman, just because your favorite YouTuber is throwing a bait cast reel doesn't necessarily mean it's the right tool for what you're doing. You'll see me run spinning reels a lot, primarily bank fishing, kayak canoe fishing. When I'm in my boat, I tend to run more bait cast. And I run bait cast plenty in kayak and canoe if I'm throwing big lures or heavier things, but understand it's a tool. I'm using the right tool for the job. So a lot of times you'll see me throwing spinning where you'll see other people throw bait casters. It's because the spinning reel's the right tool. I'm not sponsored by anybody. I'm not getting paid by anybody to fish a certain reel and trying to make it work for applications where it maybe isn't the best tool. I'm just out here catching fish. Who's a good candidate for a bait caster? Who's a good candidate for a spinning reel? And what's that third one? Spin cast? Let's talk about that now. Spin cast reel is not the most efficient method of getting line out of the reel because it's similar to a open face spinning. The spool inside here sits counter to the direction that you're taking line out, so it comes off the end of the spool and it puts it back in with a counter rotating thing like the bail. It just doesn't have the bail to open. Now the reason that it doesn't get line out as easily as a spinning reel is because of this little tiny opening. So instead of that line slinging free and going out free, it comes out of there and it's pinched by this cone to go through this little hole. And what that means is not going to have the casting distance that you get with an open face spinning. However, because it's designed like a spinning reel on the inside, you're not going to have the efficiency reeling line in like you do with a bait cast reel. The primary thing that this reel does well is it's easy. That's neither good nor bad. It's a good tool for young kids. It keeps parents from getting frustrated, keeps kids from getting frustrated because they're not tangled up all the time, they're actually fishing. So it's a good tool for that application. Just understand you're limiting yourself as far as lure size and weight. You're also limiting yourself in terms of casting distance, and the longevity on these is not going to be the same either. So it's a tool, and it's not a bad one. It's just a very specific one. Use that information as you will. Okay, so what does all that mean? Well, you should use what you're comfortable with. You should fish with really whatever you want. I just want you to have a little information on the 3 styles of reels and what they do well and what they are going to cause you trouble with. We will do videos on how to set a bait cast reel and sort of avoid some of the pitfalls. I also intend to do a spin cast reel. There's some certain issues that are pretty common on those, so we will do one over the trouble with spin cast. And of course spinning reels as well. Look for that in the future. None of the systems are immune to trouble. Hope you're enjoying what we're doing for you.